Go live.
Hi, everyone. Dale Pinkert here at TradeGateHub.com. And I have the pleasure of being able to have a conversation with Gene Epstein. Gene was a renowned book editor at Barron's, and now is a moderator at Soho Forums. Gene, thank you for granting the interview. It's very nice to meet you.
Same here. And again, I'm impressed that 6:30 in the morning you have all this energy. It's 9:30 here, so we're 3 hours apart, but I think we can still connect through the wonders of Zoom. Yeah,
we will. And what I'd like to start with is you're most well known for your stint at Barron's. That's what comes up.
Yeah.
And could you take us back even further and tell us a little bit how you got from point A to Barron's and,
Well, I wandered from job to job. I guess we'll take the next couple of hours to start by the fact that at the age of 6, I was a Stalinist because mommy was a commie. And,
okay.
But then I'm gonna go fairly quickly through this. But then at the age of 16, I decided to become a democratic socialist and distance myself from my mother's loyalty to the Soviet Union. And then by the age of 26, 27, I'd been a failed Jewish novelist, and there's a lot of history in there, but I think probably we want to cut to the chase a little further because I am 78. So there's a lot of ground to cover. By the age of 26, I was, again, a failed Jewish novelist. I'd been studying economics because I hadn't studied economics in undergraduate school, but I went to the new school in economics, partly because I thought I could get a broader perspective about issues of socialism and capitalism if I went there. That's in downtown Manhattan. And I was a bit at sea. I was getting my PhD. There are plenty of jobs in economics, and probably even to this day, not too difficult to get academic jobs in economics, because for economists, it's somewhat demanding discipline. And then also, there are lots of jobs in government and in business and on Wall Street. So a lot of PhDs go there, unlike sociology. So a lot of jobs. I was teaching economics, studying, and getting increasingly bored with the subject when I read Murray Rothbard's Man, Economy, and State, and then started to become seduced, and I'm seduced to this day by Austrian economics. Okay. Then professionally, though, I really didn't want to be a college professor. I went to Wall Street, and I miraculously got a job as director of commodity research for a national firm. Had some people working for me. I really didn't even know the difference between going short and going long at that point, but I talked my way into the job. And I kept saying to myself, how can you sell something you don't have? And I was a little perplexed about taking a short position, because as I try to teach people, in the commodity futures markets, for every short there's a long. It's inherent in how it works. I did that, but then I wrote a book about commodity trading called Making Money in Commodities, which is happily out of print. And then I was adrift, and I got a job as a planner in the planning department of the New York Stock Exchange. Had a wife and 2 kids at that point to support. And then I actually proposed to the stock exchange that they start a commodity futures market, which failed. But then I drifted into the economics department at the New York Stock Exchange, and I spent 13 and a half years there in all, until a new shakeup happened. I got bounced. So I was between jobs trying to earn a living as a freelancer, and then luckily hooked into a job as commodities editor at Barron's. Because I'd worked in the field, written a book about commodities, I managed to move into journalism as doing a column for Barron's called Commodities Corner.
I remember it, Gene.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Sure.
Okay, I remember. I'm 78. How old are you? You look a lot younger than I am. How old are you?
I just turned 70.
Okay, you're a youngster, but I guess you're
Oh,
8 years
yeah, thank you,
behind.
Gene. You're the first guy in a while that said
Yeah.
that to me. All
Oh,
right.
that's right. I used to call my uncle died at the age of 96, and I used to call him my birthday. He'd ask me how old are you. He said, "Ah, you're a youngster." I'm not hearing that anymore because he just died a couple of months ago. But that aside, um, I then I wrote extra articles. If you're a columnist, you expected to also do front of the book features. So I started to do features for Barron's about the economy. And that's when the editor-in-chief, Alan Abelson, approached me to do a weekly column about the economy. And actually, I
Uh,
balked at the prospect. I thought, every week on the economy, my whole mindset, well, you do special studies about different topics that come up. It's easy to do a column on the markets every week because there's always, something happening in the markets every week, the bond market, the stock market. But then the economy, then in fact, Alan Abelson became a lame duck, got fired, and he was around as a lame duck, and that's when I actually came to him impulsively and said, "Do you still want to launch this column for me?" And he said, "Yeah, let's stick it to those bastards." Meaning he was a lame duck, and he'll use me to stick it to those bastards. But that's too much autobiography, in fact. But
that's
anyway,
great.
so he launched a column for me that was he was going
Up
to.
and down Wall Street.
Oh, well, that was his column, Up and Down Wall
Okay.
Street. Now,
Right.
Alan had been legendary for having started a column called Up and Down Wall Street in the 1950s, when having an insouciant, irreverent voice about Wall Street was truly unique. Alan had a way with words, and he was irreverent, and his column really caught on. And in fact, he managed to make himself editor in chief by threatening to take his column away from Barron's and taking it to Forbes. He said, "Unless you make me editor in chief, I'm taking my column away. I'm quitting." And Forbes wanted his column. That's another bit of ancient history. But anyway, Alan liked my irreverence. And so he gave me the column, and he was going to call it Behind the Numbers. And then at the last minute, he said, "No, let's call it Economic Beat." Economic beat, and
Oh,
I like the journalist ring to that.
yeah.
The beat goes on, and economics is my
And
beat.
you had gumshoes too.
I'm
If you're
sure.
on a beat, you have to have a gumshoe, right?
That's right. So I thought, my God, at the late age of, I was in my late 40s then. Actually, I'm becoming a journalist. So I covered the economy for 25 years at Barron's, and then actually it was a number of years later that I asked to become the books editor. Barron's published book reviews once a month, and I wanted to bring in libertarians and free market people to do the book reviews. So I campaigned to displace the guy whose books editor was getting bored with the job anyway. So I became the books editor as well. And then in the in the early 2018, I left the job after 26 years.
Wow.
But in fact, of course, there was a shakeup. The editor in chief who took over for Alan got pushed out. And some of the rest of us got pushed out as well. But I was happy. I was 73 then, and they gave me a generous buyout. And I had by that point started the Debate Society of the Soho Forum in the fall of 2016, 2 years before. And so I thought, I actually had been thinking, the column and what I do as book review editor has become something I can make very easy, very challenging. It's very seductive. The salary is great. If they'd only fire me, I could leave. But I figured, it's hard to quit. So happily, the news came that they would give me a more than a year buyout if I left, and that was actually happy news for me
Right.
in early 2018. So since then, I've actually slowed down at the age of 78. I find I enjoy doing Twitter, and I do debates. I've done 10 debates for the Soho Forum itself, always taking the negative, and preparing for a debate takes a lot of time and energy for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And doing a
It's a
debate is
different
always.
skill than just a one-on-one interview, too. Um,
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
uh,
As
Go
as
ahead.
I tell people, You have me on. Maybe you'll put some tough questions to me, but you don't want to make a complete fool of me because, after all, why did you even invite me on the show if I'm just a jerk? So this is going to be a fairly friendly interview that I'm going to have with you, I would imagine.
I
Although
like to call them conversations, Gene.
conversations, absolutely, it's a conversation. However, in a debate, there's somebody on stage who does want to pour salt on your ideas.
Yes.
So it's a stressful encounter. And there are people in the audience who maybe have their intellectual knives out for you. So again, it's stressful to be doing a debate.
Yeah.
But I look forward to the excitement. As I say, I've done 10 debates, always taking the negative. Although the Soho, I haven't hogged it. The Soho Forum has released more than 70 debates. I'm proud of the amazing fact that a debate I had in November of 2019.
Yeah, I wrote that. That was socialism versus capitalism, and you got millions of views.
6 million. It just surpassed 6 million views, and I credit Rick Wolf with that. I think I had two other socialism debates, as a matter of fact, at the Soho Forum. They each did more than 100,000 views, which is good. But it must mean that the 6 million, which is so many more, must partly be to the credit of the celebrity of Richard Wolff, my opponent.
How would you?
Gratified. It's gotten a lot of attention.
How would you define the American economy today? Which side of the ledger are we on? What kind of hybrid are we?
Well, clearly, we have a capitalist system, my contraction for crony capitalism. But I guess it's difficult for me to put a metric to it. I do dissent often from some of my libertarian and Austrian and free market colleagues by claiming that there still is a lot of legitimate entrepreneurial energy in the economy. I guess there is no entrepreneurial company that isn't tainted to some degree by crony capitalism. I regard, for example, Walmart as a great institution, a great achievement. Walmart does take advantage of eminent domain. It does have conspiracies with government, but I think by and large, it's been a free market institution. I might make that claim in many ways, even for Amazon and Google, even though they're becoming increasingly tainted. Obviously, the difference that Amazon has made to the consumer market is astonishing. And so there are two. We're talking about legitimate free market entrepreneurship tainted with crony capitalism. At the other extreme, of course, you've got the military companies who are in bed with the Pentagon, part of the military-industrial complex. So again,
how about the most active Fed?
Yeah,
Gene, that's changed from, once we got into the year 2000 and towards the end of the Greenspan era. And the central planning that's gone on in this country since then, interventionism by the Fed, does that play a role in tainting the economy?
Oh yes, no, indeed. I was about to get to that. Clearly, the Federal Reserve the Federal Reserve essentially has always been Soviet-style planning for the most important price of all, the price of credit. But its hold. Actually, I would regard this in a way as somewhat debatable. The Federal Reserve historically always had control over the money supply, control over the short-term interest rate, and the ability to create instability in the economy, which it's done time and time again. It has since then pitched the short-term interest rate below the rate of inflation, whereas in the old days, the short-term interest rate used to be at least equal to the rate of inflation. I mention that only because obviously in a sane economy, if there is a rate of price inflation, the interest rate would always be above that rate of price inflation.
You'd have a real rate of return.
Yeah, but recently, since the year 2000, the Federal Reserve departed from that policy, and then it's also meddled.
There you go.
with the long end of the yield curve, with 10-year interest rates, much more aggressively than ever before. Although there is some mixed opinion about how successful it's been in doing that. In other words, there's a phrase that is no longer current called bond vigilantes.
Oh yeah, sure. Where are they?
Yeah, exactly. The bond vigilantes, I thought it was a clever term, were those who basically rebelled against the Federal Reserve's attempt to lower interest rates. The bond vigilantes would see the dangers of price inflation, and they would start selling bonds. When you're selling 10-year bonds, for example. So you sell 10-year bonds, and that inherently, by definition, means you're driving up the 10-year interest rate. So they've been less active. So I would say at the end of the day, clearly the Fed's ability to control the 10-year rate is much greater than ever before. Therefore, in line with what you're suggesting, the Fed's hold on that part of the economy has tightened, and that's been, of course, very much a bad thing. Although, by the way, I recently, shocked a few people by saying that that the conventional things that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell has been doing to try to rein in price inflation, I think, have been, in a limited sense, effective. And I have been somewhat surprised by the fact that he's, up till now, at least, he's shown some resolve. He's pushed the Fed funds rate, the short-term interest rate, to over 5% at a time when the price inflation, I think, is somewhat below 5%. There too, I'm a bit of a heretic. I actually think that the conventional price indexes somewhat overstate price inflation, rather than my free market colleagues who think that it understates. But anyway, I'm giving you my usual long-winded answer to that. But the punchline really is, of course, that the Fed has done more, but
are they
more
done
than ever to disrupt.
What do you
the
think,
economy.
Gene? Are they done? Are they done? It was last month's pause, the beginning of a pause.
Well, I have to say that on balance, you asked me to forecast, but okay. The point is that I think they're probably not done, only because. Okay. So I got to, but let me explain why they're not done. Probably not, only because Powell has definitely earned some street cred with me, in that his determination, he's raised the Fed funds rate by more, by
the fastest rise in history
than anyone. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So he did it, and and he said that he's not done. It'll be a long time. So I will have to credit him, take him at his word. He's a corrupt official, sure. He shouldn't be running. Nobody should be running the Federal Reserve, of course. But I have to take him at his word. But then, of course, the doubt, the on the one hand, on the other hand, problem is that Powell has been lucky. He hasn't faced a real economic contraction yet. We are in a period of stagflation.
Do you think that's ahead? The lag time from Fed policy really should start hitting home next year?
Okay, wow, another forecasting question. Let me bounce it back to you. What do you think? Look,
yeah,
again,
I do.
I've been confounded.
I have too.
Okay, yes, indeed. Okay,
all right.
There's a kid named Neil Duda who was actually an intern of mine, and I'm very proud of the fact he was originally going to go to law school when he was my intern, but he's become a prominent Wall Street analyst. And his recent joke was, "Look, you can't keep saying the recession is 6 months away. 12 months ago was 6 months away. Now it keeps becoming 6 months away. So obviously we're now I don't think we're in recession right now, and it's pretty late in the day. As you probably know, the best single indicator is the inverted yield curve. In particular, part of the index of leading economic indicators is the Fed funds rate versus the 10-year rate. Usually, of course, the overnight Fed funds rate is lower than the 10-year, and now for months it's been higher. And whenever it's higher than the 10-year, that's what we call an inverted yield curve. It's a negative number, and it's been quite negative for quite a while now. And it's one of the best indicators of imminent recession. It has virtually no false signals going back for years, no false signals, and we still not getting the recession that it keeps signaling should happen. So I'm a bit confounded. But you're saying the recession is 6 months away or 9 months away? What's going to happen? The contraction.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a growth scare, and I don't believe I think there's going to be a growth scare.
Growth scare?
I don't think that. Yeah.
What's a growth scare? What do you mean?
Well, copper looks pretty negative to me. Oil's, a growth scare meaning a slowdown, and that earnings will compress because of that.
Well, okay, you're talking about various indicators. I was pushed. I was up at Porcupine Festival.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that. So pork is for porcupine. All right.
Yeah, it doesn't mean pig.
Okay. All right. Okay. Did you didn't get stabbed by any of the quills of the guys that were there, did you?
The derivation, I've asked people to check this story. A porcupine is supposed to be an animal that will never aggress against you unless you initiate aggression against the porcupine. So that, of course, is the definition of a libertarian. Self-defense is okay, but we never initiate aggression against another.
Interesting.
That's why we're porcupines. That's the derivation of it. But so yeah, you learn something. But anyway,
well, John McAfee was running for to represent the Libertarian Party about 8 years ago. Anyway, that's all. Yeah,
he had a
I interviewed him then. What a character!
He had a slightly shady past, I thought.
Yeah,
so
and very shady.
Rather creepy stories about it. But that's the point. The question been put to me. Look, the business cycle dating committee is always that's what they call themselves, part of the National Bureau of Economic Research. They're this official group of economists who tells us when we're in a recession or not. And I happen to know an inside story that they're politically corrupt. The Democrats argue with the Republicans.
What a surprise!
Yeah, but that aside, when I was pushed by one of the people in the audience at PorcFest to define a recession, I probably should have said, look, there's no reason not to go with the journalistic definition of recession as 2 calendar quarters in a row of a negative figure on GDP. Negative, I don't like to say negative growth. That's an ugly neologism, a contraction. And last year, as a matter of fact, we did have 2 consecutive quarters of a negative print on GDP. So that was a recession, but it was very short-lived. But what I'm getting at is that you're talking about this, that, and the other number. I want to see for a recession the GDP number, the real gross domestic product number, is quite a flawed figure, but it's reasonably serviceable. I want to see negatives from quarter to quarter on that number before I say we're in a recession. That's all. So if are you forecasting that? The GDP number, it isn't finagled. It's the reasonably honest group of people who
I'm forecasting a market event that doesn't have to lead. Yeah, just a reset in the market.
A bear market? 20%?
No, a crash.
A crash. Good. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, right. Okay. In July.
A bear market, as you know, is technically 20% on any index like the S&P, 20% down from the recent peak. And you're saying a crash, so you're saying more than 20% down, which is good enough for me. If that happens, then you'll see it in GDP as well, real GDP.
Okay. I want to get back to something that could help change people's lives. You had the really privilege of being a book editor. And if you could tell us a couple of titles that you liked when you were at Barron's, being the book editor, that our viewers should take a look at and maybe dive into, that could prepare them for, and educate them, edify them in the financial world?
In the financial world, okay. Well, I'm not an expert in finance, but if you can narrow it
Okay.
to the financial
It could
world,
be markets. It could be,
okay.
Market Wizards by Jack Schwager. It could be,
Jack,
what touched you?
Jack and I were boys together in commodities. When I got my job as director of commodity research, Jack was my chief assistant. I got hired over him. That's when I didn't know the difference between a long and a short. Jack,
Uh,
have you had Jack on your
yeah.
show?
Yeah, I've
That's
interviewed
fine.
Jack several times. Great.
I haven't
I
I
love
haven't
Jack.
spoken to him in years, although he wrote this very fat book about commodities, and
Yeah.
then he put it out of print. He's mostly retired, isn't he? Or
Yeah,
what's
he
he up
is.
to?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's still looking for wizards.
still looking for wizards. Yeah, he did 3 books, 3 Market Wizards interviews, I believe. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. And then, well, of course, the crazy part was he and I were both rock-ribbed fundamentalists when it came to commodities, and then I left and I went on to the New York Stock Exchange and then to Barron's, and the next thing I know, Jack had become a chartist, a technician, which is an odd kind of development. But again, that's inside baseball. I have to answer your question.
Yeah.
Look,
Couple of
I
titles.
do think. I do think that Burton Malkiel's book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, is a very good preparation.
Okay.
I imagine. Look, you must know titles better than I with respect to finance, but don't you agree? Random Walk
Yeah,
Down Wall Street is very
that's a good one.
readable
Yeah.
and very informative on the stock market.
Okay.
I think that where my real field is economics, and there I would I generally recommend books by Thomas Sowell, even though I think Sowell has certain limitations. He never quite bought Austrian business cycle theory. Oddly, Sowell was very much a disciple of Friedrich Hayek in certain crucial ways, but he never quite followed through on why Hayek won the Nobel Prize for his business cycle theory. But Thomas Sowell wrote a book called Basic Economics, which I think is a classic. It's gone through 3 editions. He explains economic principles not with charts or formulae, but by telling
Yeah.
stories, and with a certain edge by pointing to all the ways in which people can't accept how capitalism lifts the living standards of the broad masses of people. So I think Sowell, who's still alive, he's past 90, and a number of people have pointed out that his research and his books on the subject of race should qualify him for an economics Nobel, and he richly deserves it. But I do think that Basic Economics is a great book,
Okay.
even though it's flawed when it comes to price deflation. So that's 2 titles.
Okay, that's
I
good.
could list a few more. Yeah.
All right, let me wrap in and take you all the way back to your commodity days.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so we had this huge bull market in grains going into the invasion,
Yeah.
Russian invasion, because Ukraine's such a breadbasket, and they've
Yeah.
retreated they gave it all back, just like oil did. But
Yeah.
there's something called Grande El Nino out there in the Pacific right now, and people looking for super cycle and commodities. Do you think it'd
Wow.
be a good idea for me to build a silo in my backyard and store wheat and store wheat in it, Gene? What do you think?
I'm gonna have to duck that question. I actually haven't. In fact, I did a number of articles about the oil market when I was at Barron's. When oil was over.
You're still writing about oil, Gene. You're talking about, in your stream, you talk about the greenies are going to be disappointed. Why is there, vast new oil projects in the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, Norway, and the Emirates? You think we're going to be some people that believe we're going to phase out fossil fuels are living in la la land?
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, as has been reported, the use of oil and fossil fuels in general is still at an all-time high. As I tweeted, decades of all these global agreements to cut back. Obviously, the poor people in the world need fossil fuels. They can't wait 20, 30 years for new innovative developments in nuclear, for example. Nuclear, I think, is the major promise of the future, even though nuclear is certainly not going to deliver over the next 10, 20 years. There are various innovative projects that are at work with nuclear, probably very likely, and of course it's been argued plausibly that had nuclear not been hamstrung 40 years ago, it would have been much further along by today. But we can't undo the past. The point is that again, the poor people of the world, you're a 5-year-old poor kid in India, you've got parents, they want a better life for their son over the next 10, 20 years. And that's where fossil fuels are important. The person to read about this is my namesake, Alex Epstein. He pronounces it Epstein. I pronounce it Epstein. The moral case for fossil fuels and fossil future. He's become quite knowledgeable about that. And he makes the point that there is a moral case for fossil fuels. The morality of any progressive who cares about the plight of the poor people of the world. And it's very clear that the two most populous countries in the world, India and China, not to mention all the countries of Africa, are not going to go along with this idea of turning to windmill and wind and sun, because they are not unreliable sources of energy. So that's clear enough. And once we recognize that, then of course, as I wryly commented, the climate alarmists should be alarmed by the move toward fossil fuels, and yet I don't even think they take their own propaganda seriously, that the world is coming to an end because of an extra couple of degrees of temperature.
We're headed towards a new ice age, maybe. As a contrarian, we could end up having a mini ice age before that happens.
Okay. No. Well, look, again, there's the other guy to read, actually, who I had at the Soho Forum, is Stephen Koonin. I like to promote him because Koonin is actually a capital D Democrat, a physicist and climate scientist at NYU, who was an appointee in the Obama administration. So I try to establish his credibility that way with the climate alarmists. He's not a free market libertarian nut like me. He's very mainstream, and he points out that that the warming trend in the world, globally, started in the late 1800s. And one of the fastest warming trends occurred from 1910 to 1940. And now that's key because man-made warming didn't start to kick in until the mid-20th century. So if the Earth could warm at such a fast rate before man played a role, as he points out, isn't it obvious that natural forces are probably in the saddle? And our influence on global warming could be as little as 10% of the story. This is something he explains quite well in his book Unsettled, about the nature of global warming. Global warming is happening. It's probably mainly due to natural forces. The Earth is 2 degrees hotter than it was 100 years ago, and yet human beings are doing better than ever. And if we can do better than ever with 2 degrees of global warming, we can continue to do better than ever with another 2 degrees of global warming.
Are you optimistic about our future here in America, Gene?
Oh, wow.
And does the war in Ukraine stir up memories for you? Are you worried about that as well?
Well, okay. So let's take another couple of hours on answering those questions. I tend to be a perennial optimist, and so that's probably my weakness. And even though certainly the last 20 years, 25 years that I've lived through has been disappointing to optimism. But there's a guy named Mark Mills who's written a book about the Roaring '20s to come. Mark Mills has argued, to my mind, cogently, that we really are on the cusp and about to see happen a huge increase in productivity and
Because
labor
of
saving
AI?
devices from AI. Yeah,
Okay.
and that AI is not a threat but a blessing, and that likely government will have to get out of the way and allow this big spurt in productivity to occur. I'm
Government,
optimistic.
well, again, when's the government ever gotten out of the way?
Okay, well, I do believe that 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 what let's refer to as IT, information technology, starting in the 1990s up to the present, information technology really has done wonders. We do. You and I are old enough to be, I'm sure, so pretty blown away by all that
Yeah,
occurred in IT. It's
yeah,
the empowerment of the consumer through the Amazon revolution, the empowerment of the consumer through Walmart. Here's this hayseed named Sam Walton who figures out that the poor people of China can see their living standards be lifted by turning out cheap goods that the poor people of the U.S. buy at Walmart. All kinds of great things happen. The fact is, it's very hard for politicians to stop these things. So
okay.
we have seen progress in that regard. People are living better than ever before in the U.S. and elsewhere, and so I think you struck an unduly cynical note there just now. I guess we've got the makings of a debate, but go ahead.
Okay, well, I'd love to be on the stage with you, and I enjoyed talking to you, Gene. I could talk to
Sure.
you for hours. You're, you know, there's been so much wisdom in this conversation with your life story that you could, so many pearls of wisdom that I could
Well, thank you.
string a necklace. I could string a necklace with them,
Okay.
Gene. So
Well,
really,
you killed me with kind of. I want to let me make a couple of one announcement. Since I gather you want to go, and that's fine. My Soho Forum, though that compliment you just gave me just qualified you for free ticket for you and your loved ones to the next Soho Forum. We charge $24 a ticket, and there's also an after party. And the after party, I guess, costs $8. We have our Soho Forums at on Bleecker Street in downtown Manhattan, and then 2 blocks uptown is the loft apartment I share with my wife Asako, a huge loft apartment. And so we throw an after party just 2 blocks uptown, and people stay till 11:30. That's when an old guy like me starts kicking our young guests out. But our next debate is going to be on Tuesday, July 25th in New York City, and it's going to be a debate about immigration. Alex Narasta of the Cato Institute is going to defend basically an argument for free immigration. He's going to deal with the Milton Friedman paradox. Milton Friedman said you could have a welfare state or you can have free immigration, but you can't have both. And Alex and others have done work arguing that the ways in which the immigrants exploit the welfare state is really not that serious, and that on balance, free immigration will benefit us. Taking the negative will be a really smart guy named Francis Menton. And that's going to be on Tuesday, July 25th. And we're going to have a special warm-up act. Lou Perez, a great comedian, is going to do his Latino immigrant jokes as a warm-up act. So that's, again, July 25th. I hope to see you there. And you've got a free ticket to take advantage of. And I want to see you at the after party as well.
Gene, really an honor meeting you, and thank you so much for your time. It's our most precious currency. Thanks for spending some of yours with us.
My pleasure. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Gene Epstein, everyone. Follow him at Gene Soho Forum on Twitter and check out his debates. He says he's slowing down. Doesn't sound like it to me. Thank you, Gene.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.